Before we begin, a reminder. This podcast discusses mature themes that may not be appropriate for all audiences. Please listen with care.
Can I just say I'm Katie and this is part of my story?
That's great.
Should I say it again?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm Katie and this is part of my story.
This is Katie, a physician and committed Christian who, like me, grew up evangelical in the 80s and 90s. She comes from a close-knit family and a childhood immersed in stories. First and foremost, the stories of Scripture, but also the stories of writers like George MacDonald and C.S. Lewis, which her father would often read to her at night. From an early age, Katie had an awareness of God's presence, which has never left her. This episode, more than anything, is about the importance of stories, especially the stories we tell about our bodies. We will hear Katie's story and how her understanding of her own femininity has been shaped in part by stories. We will also hear from theologian Angela Franks about the ambient stories our culture tells us about gender and the body, and we will consider the meaning of the body in light of God's story, his sacred self-revelation. What is the story he is telling through our bodies, through our maleness and femaleness? I'm Abigail Favale, and you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This is episode 3, Body and Story. Let's begin with Katie's story.
From my earliest memory, I had a sense of God and very much wanted to know him and please him. And when I was 6, I was baptized in a Foursquare church and knew at that point that I wanted to follow Jesus with my whole life. And I've started to figure out it's not really about me following him so much as becoming aware that he's looking for me.
Alongside this closeness to God, Katie also experienced, from a young age, a sense of disconnect with her gender.
I have a really clear and distinct memory of taking a bath. I think I was probably around 6. I was sitting in the bathtub, and I had been sitting there for a while, and little air bubbles had attached themselves to the little hairs on my legs. And I was just looking at it and observing it, and to my 6-year-old eyes, they looked like little teeny eggs or babies attached to the hairs on my legs. And I remember a distinct sense of horror in that moment and brushing them off as fast as I could because I was utterly repulsed in that moment by the thought of myself as a mother or a nurturer. I didn't want other things feeding on me or depending on me or resting on me. And of course, in that moment, I would not have been able to express that. It was just a deeply visceral reaction. In retrospect, I've realized it was my first conscious glimpse of womanhood, or at least some aspects of it, and I didn't want it. I didn't want it because I was terrified of it. This thing, whatever this was, this specter of femininity was too intense for me. It was just too potent and too organic. It was too humid or something. I haven't ever really been able to find the right words for it, but it was too much and overwhelming, and I didn't want it. Being a boy seemed so much simpler. It seemed so much more efficient. It was so much cleaner somehow and less mysterious and just easier to be a boy. I thought I could do a much better job being a boy. I thought I would excel at being a boy more than I could at being a girl. And so it was more attractive to me. It was just far less messy and scary.
Not long after that moment in the bathtub, Katie began to resist wearing skirts and dresses, and dressed like a boy at every opportunity, wearing a dress to church, but then changing into pants on the car ride home. She even began to pray to God that he would change her sex.
I've never actually talked about this, and it kind of has to do with the tooth fairy. So, teeth fall out and stick them under your pillow. In the morning, the teeth are gone and there's money. So I kind of got used to that system. So then I just kind of got it in my head that you can pray for anything you want at night and then check in the morning and see if it happens. So then, and I was still in elementary school at this point. So I would pray. I would pray that I would grow male parts at night. And in the morning, I would eagerly jump up and see, and that never happened. And so, that was a bummer at that time.
Katy's gender dysphoria escalated even more when she began to hit puberty.
God didn't seem to respond to my request to replace my girl parts with boy parts, and it was a total nightmare for me when I started menstruating. I really hated having periods. I don't think I've ever met anybody who actually likes it, but I really hated being out of control there. I really hated having my body do something that just felt like it decided to do it whenever it felt like it, and I couldn't control it. And the blood, I was just like, why blood? That's not, it's distressing. It's really distressing. Yeah, to have blood coming out just doesn't seem civil or right or beautiful. And yet, and that this is what my body does. And I think it's just sort of the inexorability of it just really, really wigged me out. And I think it was just sort of the getting used to that door closing on womanhood, where it felt like, okay, maybe I won't actually be a woman. Or maybe I don't actually have a uterus. Maybe I won't actually ever have periods. And then, no, I will. I am. I do. And then there's sort of the finality. There's no going back now, which was actually true. I think it was really the finality of puberty that kind of got me. I hated it, everything about it, and felt defeated and afraid and steamrolled into femaleness and womanhood.
We will come back to Katy's story, but I'd like to take a little detour to dig into some of what Katy has just articulated. That feeling of being disturbed by the reality and unruliness of the body, and that sense that the body should be something under our complete control. I think this is a very modern intuition, a story we've absorbed about what a body is and what our embodiment means. I spoke with theologian Angela Franks about this, who has written extensively on the modern understanding of the body and identity.
I think it's very helpful to think in terms of ambient philosophy. So what are the ambient ideas and images that we're just swimming in all the time? People often think, well, I've really sat down and worked through what I believe, and it's like really unique to me. But I think that's actually impossible for us to do. Like, we're born into ideas, and we're just always going to take some on faith and just believe them without even knowing that it's an idea that we've believed.
It's not uncommon to hear a kind of like explanation of the debates about gender as like it's a new Gnosticism, right? So I'm curious whether you think that's a good assessment or not. You've written how our culture seems to be both disdainful of the body, but also obsessed with it, right? So it's not just this pure Gnosticism of neglecting the body, but there's also this like intense preoccupation with it. What would you say about the ambient philosophy of the body specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think people are wrong when they point to Gnosticism or a new Gnosticism as being part of the ambient ideas, insofar as we do not trust our bodies. We suspect they're holding us back. And those are broadly speaking Gnostic kinds of ideas.
Gnosticism was an early Christian heresy that emerged in the late 1st century of the Church. One of the core features of Gnosticism was the belief that the physical, material world was evil, and that salvation involves escaping from the material world, including our own bodies.
The difference is how obsessed we are with our bodies. If you're a real Gnostic spiritualist, you're not gonna, go to the gym and, you're not gonna think a lot about your diet. I mean, insofar as like you're trying to avoid some things, I guess they did that. But like the whole point is to stop thinking so much about your body. And so So our contemporary background noise is very modern. If it's Gnostic, it's a very modern Gnostic, because our bodies, we suspect, are the problem. And so therefore, we suspect that they also are the route to the solution. So if the body's the problem, it's also somehow the solution. And so we deal with that in a very modern way by resorting to technology, to technological change and manipulation. So this goes back to people like Francis Bacon and René Descartes, who advocated that we should be the masters and possessors of nature. And the language there that Descartes was using is legal language. He was trained as a lawyer. And so it's trying to say that, like, we're the master and our body's the serf in the old feudalist way of understanding things. So our bodies should labor for us and we should tell them what to do. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it through technology, which is something that, you know, the ancient Gnostics could not do. And so we spend a lot of time trying to solve our problems through our body by using technology. So you see that very clearly in things around gender, for example, where the natural body, as it healthily came out of the womb, right? You have a healthy baby boy, say, which means if everything goes right, he's going to grow older and be fertile and be able to have children. So all of this is a sign of health, right? Fertility and a functioning reproductive system is a sign of health. We look at that and we say, no, actually, there's a problem. Like, that healthy body is the problem, because it's impinging on my consciousness, on my understanding of myself. And so how are we going to deal with that problem? We're going to deal with it through technology. So we're going to take a healthy, fertile body and make it unhealthy. In fact, we're going to make it infertile. We're going to do all of these interventions that are constantly pushing against what the body naturally wants to do and be. And so in that sense, that's the modern ambient idea, that when our body is a problem, it's perfectly acceptable to take technological means to solve that problem. And obviously, I should add, there are times in which the body is in fact the problem, right? You know, you have cancer, like, that's a body problem. Technology is perfectly acceptable, I mean, within moral means, to address that body problem. So it's not that we're saying that there aren't body problems or there aren't appropriate ways in which we should use technology and in which technology can in fact be a real gift. But our healthy sexed body as it comes out of the womb, that's not a body problem. But we take our identity problems and we find it psychologically and spiritually easier somehow to make them body problems. It's like easier, instead of having a real existential identity crisis. Who am I and why am I here? And am I in fact a good person that I think, I thought I was a good person? Am I really? Like, all of that can be really painful. And so it's a lot easier to say, my body's the problem. And I'll take some pills and I'll do surgery and all of that stuff is psychologically easier for us. So we have identity problems, but we make them into body problems.
And that's something like we all do to a certain extent, right? This isn't just people who struggle with gender specifically. Like you said, it's like this ambient, it's in the air, and we all do it to one degree or another. When I talked to Katy, she expressed relief that certain technological interventions and influences simply weren't on the table when she was young.
Gender dysphoria is obviously quite complex, and I don't want to generalize my own experience, but I do want to say that I breathe a sigh of relief looking back over my life. I feel like I dodged a huge bullet being born and growing up in the age before the internet and before social media, before widespread access to puberty blockers and cross-gender hormone therapy. It was a bit of a bummer not to have words to express myself as a child, not to have a community that was openly talking about these things. But had I been born 20 years later, I absolutely would have wanted puberty blockers and testosterone. I may easily have gone on to gender-affirming surgeries. And I can see now, looking back, that for me, that would have been catastrophic in the long run. And I know and I acknowledge that when a loved one is in pain or confusion, that the instinct is to move quickly in such a way that relieves the pain or resolves the confusion. But if that relief comes at the cost of compromising a person's core essence, it will in the long run result in greater harm. So I'm deeply grateful to my friends and family and the church who has hung in there with me for a really long time, for decades, for my whole life to this point in my pain that's waxed and waned and confusion that's gradually resolved as these things very, very gradually become more clear.
We will hear the rest of Katy's story, how she came into that sense of clarity. But before we go there, I want to continue my conversation with Angela about the story our culture tells about the body. Thinking more about not just the ideas, but the images that we're presented with, but also what those images actually say, especially about male and female, right? They tend to be very idealized, very pornified. And so I think that's an interesting layer to think about this too, not just the ideas that are ambient, but also the visual expressions of those ideas that are ambient and that we're absorbing all the time.
It's part of the modern obsession with our bodies that makes us so modern. And being bombarded with images of the human body makes us hyper-conscious of ourselves as presentable to other people. And so that aspect of our body, which is real, that it presents us to the world, makes us visible in the world, that can start to feel like the only aspect of our body. My body's basically to be an Instagram mannequin. That's why I exist, is to present myself to the world. And that's why my body exists. And so if that's your understanding of your body, it's really easy to take the next step and say, well, how can I present it differently or better, quote unquote better? And of course, the better is going to be dependent on all of these cultural and images and ideas. So it's a instrumentalization of our bodies. Like we're viewing our bodies as this instrument of influence over other people and forgetting the deeper fact of our body, that it is there for me as a person. It's to express me as a person in the world. And that's going to include these embodied relationships, like being a mother, being a father, like that there are these deeper relational aspects to the body that's not just simply a matter of essentially a kind of PR campaign for myself. I use my body to brand, right?
So if this is the ambient narrative or story that our culture offers, how does it contrast with the story that Christianity tells us about the body?
Well, this is actually a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is what insights from the theology of the body can help us navigate this terrain that we're swimming in.
The theology of the body is shorthand for a series of over 100 catechetical homilies Pope John Paul II gave from 1979 to 1984. These homilies provided profound reflections on the meaning of the body according to Scripture, from Genesis and Song of Songs to the Gospels and Paul's letters.
There's nothing incorrect in saying that my body makes me visible in the world. 100% it does that. That is in fact its basic job, according to John Paul II, which is this first basic idea in the theology of the body, that the body expresses the person. And so when we recognize that the body makes us visible, we also recognize that it makes us vulnerable because other people can see us. Like there's only so much hiding from view that we can do. And so our contemporary impulse is to manage that imaging. So we take the fact that the body makes us visible and we try to do damage control for how vulnerable that makes us. So John Paul II's insight is, however, that the body's visibility is a kind of sacramentality. He calls the body a quasi-sacrament. What he means is not that it's one of the 7 sacraments. He's not trying to say that. He's saying that what sacraments do is to make visible, reliably, an invisible grace. That's what sacraments do. So the visible bread and wine, if the words of consecration have been said, those we can trust reliably communicate the invisible reality of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. So John Paul II is trying to say that our bodies do something similar, that they reliably communicate an invisible reality. And so the question is, well, what's that invisible reality? He answers that 2 ways. He says, first of all, it's the person, who you are. You are your body, but you are also more than your body, right? You're not reducible to your body. And so the body is there to make you visible. And what's different about this, what's different from the kind of Instagramming brand building, is that the body doesn't have to be fixed at all in any way to make you visible. It's always doing this 100% perfectly. Always, all the time. Like whether you're asleep or going for a run or taking your picture, like your body is always perfectly making you visible. The other invisible thing that the body makes visible is the truth that God himself is self-gift. So how does the body make this visible? So this is the second basic idea of John Paul II in the Theology of the Body, which is that the body has a meaning, and that meaning, which he calls a spousal meaning, is that we are made for self-gift, that we are only happy in giving of ourselves generously to God and to other people. And the body does this precisely because it is sexed. It's sexed as male and female. The reproductive system is the only bodily system that requires another person in order to successfully complete it. Like, I don't need anybody else to digest or to breathe my air in or whatever. If everything's working fine, I'll do that perfectly well on my own. But I need another person to generate a new human being. And so the incompleteness of the body when it comes to human generation in its being sexed as male or female, that incompleteness points to the fact that God himself is ordered towards relation, towards self-gift, that God himself, in fact, is relation. He is Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so JP2 thinks that the body always reliably communicates that we are only made happy by being ordered to something beyond ourselves, and that this is, in fact, this is one of the ways in which we image God himself as Trinity.
I feel like there's kind of a pop version of Theology of the Body that seems to really make it seem like Theology of the Body is just about sex and it's for married people. So what, I guess, like, maybe could you say something about, like, who the Theology of the Body is for? Like, is it for everyone? Is it just about sex, or is it about something deeper?
I've taught the Theology of the Body, I don't even know how many times, maybe 25 or 30 times. And I find often people take the class because they think it's John Paul II's sex ed class, right? Theology of the Body is John Paul II's sex ed manual. And they sometimes are disappointed because the Theology of the Body talks an awful lot about the body. It talks a good amount about sex, if by sex you mean male and female. But Theology of the Body is really about the body. And John Paul II said that the prompt for writing it was the misunderstanding, the really shocked disbelief around the church's reaffirmation of the prohibition on contraception, which happened in 1968. So that prompted John Paul to write about what it means to be an embodied person, because he recognized that the misunderstanding around the church's teaching on contraception was at a deeper level, a misunderstanding about what it means to be an embodied person. So if we think about the modern tendency to think of the body as a problem and to think of it needing to be controlled through technology, for John Paul II, that is what is happening with something like contraception. So in a sense, it's an earlier version of the kinds of struggles we're dealing with gender, right? That we view the body as a problem, we want to control it through technology. So John Paul II wanted to emphasize that, in my language, what we think are body problems are not actually body problems. And he wanted to show, in particular, that the phenomenon of fertility, of the male and female power to generate, is a positive thing because it is how we bodily image the generative generosity of God. And so he wanted us to reframe our understanding of that bodily power. Not, of course, in a way to say that everybody has to go out and be mothers and fathers, because he himself was not, right? So he also has a chapter where he affirms the church's teaching on celibacy and the goodness of that. And so if the bodily power of generativity is a good thing, surrendering it is also a good thing. That's a very great gift. You're giving a gift to God that's very great, as opposed to just surrendering, the extra coffee in the afternoon or whatever you do for Lent, right? And so he wanted to point out the goodness of this gift and call us to purity, to that conversion.
The body reveals the person. This is one way in which the body serves a sacramental function, making visible an invisible reality. And the body also reveals something important about God.
So I also grew up in the 80s and 90s in evangelical Christianity. Like, that was a wild time in many ways. In that context, do you feel like you were getting certain messages about what girls should be like and what boys should be like?
Oh, it's really funny, Abby, because no, I don't have a sense that I was getting messages there on what boys do and what girls do. And I think part of it was growing up in the Northwest where, there were not well-defined gender roles. And also coming from this family where the women in my family are, on both sides, back generations, are fairly dominant. There's very much you can do anything you want to do, Katie. You can be anything you want to be. The message that I did get frequently is that marriage is where it's at. Marriage to a man is really where you're going to find your fulfillment, and that the nuclear family is God's plan for building his kingdom, that's really where the center is. And you won't be happy and you will be lonely until you're married. That was definitely the message. It's only been very recently that I've been able to see that.
Another ambient story is that marriage is the ideal path, the ultimate vocation for everyone. But for Katy, for reasons that will soon become clear, that ideal didn't seem possible. Let's pick up her story again.
Then around 6th grade, two things started happening, not entirely independent from each other. I started becoming more intensely attracted to other girls at school, and I started thinking seriously about what I should do with my life. And again, I didn't have any words for what was happening at that point. But I can look back now and see I was getting crushes on my friends, on my girlfriends, and I had no interest at all in boys. And that got 1,000 times more intense in high school. And as that was happening, and I was totally bewildered by it and embarrassed, but didn't know why, I thought I needed to decide what to do with my life. And I knew I should give up everything for Jesus because of the verse, to whom much is given, much will be required. And looking at my life, I thought I had been given much, so I needed to give a lot. And I knew by that time that my approach to relationships with both boys and girls and women and men was backward or at least wonky, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I decided to become a medical missionary in Africa so I could study biology and medicine and then die young in the bush while saving people in the name of Jesus, and all in the context of a culture so different from my own that nobody, including myself, would care or even notice that I was at odds with the created order when it came to gender, relationships, and marriage. So I did that. Through high school and college and medical school, I put my nose to the grindstone. I worked hard. I pretty much avoided people and any kind of real or deep or true relationship. I was pretty lonely, but getting through school mostly distracted me from it.
Part of the reason for Katy's isolation is that she lacked a story, a vision for how she could live a rich and meaningful life outside of the structure of the nuclear family. Marriage and family life, as important and beautiful as those are, was the only real story on offer in her upbringing. And this story that Katy was told is half true. We are made for marriage. But the fullness of that truth, the real story, is something Katy discovered later in adulthood. Earthly marriage is only a sign, an anticipation of the ultimate nuptial reality, the union of Christ and his bride, the church, God's marriage with humankind. It is encountering this fuller, deeper story that helped Katy eventually accept and embrace her femaleness. That, and a little George MacDonald. But more on that later.
When did you first encounter a kind of grander vision of marriage, like this idea that earthly marriage actually is a sign of the fuller nuptial reality between God and humankind that will be realized in fullness?
That came about after my fairly short missionary stint in Africa, when I completely fell apart because I did not have the relationships and the spiritual support that I needed there, and came back to the U.S. I landed in Washington, D.C. and started attending an Anglican church there. And that was my first introduction to the liturgy and sacraments. And it was actually that, getting introduced and getting familiar with the liturgy and sacramental theology. And that was in the context of, for once, being in this church that was aware of itself, this little church in DC, was aware of itself on the timeline of creation, fall, redemption, consummation. And so it's not only our privilege and our joy, but our responsibility to be aware of where we are on that timeline and to be aware of where we're coming from creation and fall and redemption, and then to be looking forward and moving towards the consummation. And it was at that point, that was 10 or 11 years ago, that I started really thinking about union and what is union, and then why is there male and female? Why are we dimorphic? Why is there male and female? And then I started really tripping over sexual union. What is that, and why is that? And then actually it was crystallized for me in Thomas Howard's book, The Chance or the Dance.
Thomas Howard was a writer and convert to Catholicism who died in 2020. Chance or the Dance is one of his many books.
He uses the premise of looking at the old myth, the medieval paradigm that everything means everything, as opposed to the new myth that nothing means anything. So Thomas Howard characterizes the old myth, the medieval myth, as everything means everything, that God, our creator and creator of everything around us, has infused his entire creation with meaning. And everything, ourselves included, has both a material form and a metaphysical meaning behind it that points back to our creator in his beauty and glory and in the order that he's created. In ourselves, everything about us, everything about our bodies reflects our meaning as human beings who are able to relate to God.
What Katy's describing here is something Angela brought up earlier, the sacramentality of creation, and specifically the sacramentality of the body in its maleness and femaleness. The visible world reveals the invisible. That's the basic sacramental principle. Our very embodiment as man and woman is part of God's self-revelation. Our capacities for nuptial union and generativity are an icon of Christ's union with the church. And these also point toward God's Trinitarian nature. The Trinity is an interpersonal communion, the source of all being and life. As sexually different yet complementary, our bodies signal that we are made for interpersonal, life-giving communion, and thus, in a distant way, image the mystery of the Trinity.
I started to resonate with that deeply, that there was actually meaning behind the natural order, behind bodies and in bodies, and realizing what this Eucharist was all about, and how my own body was interacting with the body of Christ. These things actually have meaning, because what we hold in ourselves, what I as a woman hold in myself, in all my womanly form and in my potential to bear children, to bring new life into existence, is the ideal that God in his wisdom put in my own body, his ideal of womanhood. And he validates that by becoming a man himself. And he says, this is my ideal of a man. But he did that. He said, no, you as a woman, this is what womanhood is. And in your body, Katy, even if you never go through the experience of sexual union on earth, your womanhood is not at all diminished, because all of you declares the upcoming union of myself with my church, of the wedding itself. And I think it's also kind of a hold your horses moment, because if I say, no, I know what fulfillment is. Fulfillment is me using my body now in union with a man to produce children, so that then I can someday be a grandparent and babysit my grandkids and then die. That's what fulfillment is. It's a bit of a slap in the face, I think, to him who says, no, it is so much more than that I actually haven't even told you yet what it's all there for. So what I need you to do is to sit tight and believe that all of you is just how I want you to be in order to fulfill that union that's to come. And that's where it terrifies me that the church may bend on gender and bend towards what our culture is saying, because it is so important and so crucial that the church sees that God is our creator, and God is the one who brings new human beings into existence. He's the one who creates each of us, knits and weaves each of us together in our mother's wombs. He's the one who brings us into the world, either as male or female, and that's all part of this beautiful and wonderful plan for this union that's to come. And it's good, and it's beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's joyful, and it's also really hard. I've had a really hard time with it for a long time. So it's so helpful for me when the church says, yeah, okay, Katy, you're a woman. It's been hard. Sorry about that. It's been hard. But you are a woman. You were born a woman. You'll always be a woman. That's a good thing. And we're going to explore with you what it means for you to be a woman. It would have been totally disastrous for me if, as a 13, 14-year-old girl, if the people close to me had said, Katy, we see that you might actually be a boy. You might actually be a man, and we would love to help you do that. But it would have really, really put a damper on my discovery of who I actually am and my own personal delight in it. So, and I'm also right in the middle of it. There's a lot I haven't figured out, but I am very grateful for where I am right now, and would like to implore the church to continue to hold to the truth that our Creator creates us, and He creates us male and female, and He said that that's good, and that we can accept and receive that, and He'll give us the grace for that. So I think that one thing that I'm actually just really personally excited about, that the wedding is coming, the capital W wedding is coming. This is a beautiful and joyful and glorious event, and that all of these discussions that we're having around gender and what is gender and what is marriage, what is union and what is union not, These are all conversations about the church figuring out how to get ready. I, as a Christian who stands on the outside of marriage and feels often that I likewise stand outside of home and family, but as one whose entire being longs to be in union with another, but has no desire for heterosexual marriage, I desperately need the church to be looking forward to the wedding feast of the Lamb, to the marriage of Christ and his church on his return, the consummation of all things. And it's in that context, with that view, that I find my life not only tolerable, but possibly even interesting and worth living. If what we're doing here, if what I'm doing, and what all my Christian brothers and sisters are doing, married, single, widowed, divorced, if what we're all doing is getting ready for the wedding, for the completion of the period of betrothal that we're living in now, to that time when unification with our Lord becomes reality in the fullness of our beings, then I can live. And it's in that context that I can say, yes, I am a woman. I embody the feminine, and that embodiment is a sure sign of a coming union that satisfies not only my deepest desire, but also my design. So I need the church to say boldly and with joy and excitement that women are women and that men are men, and not by our own self-determination, but by the wisdom of our Creator, in order that we might, in some small and veiled way, understand that we're getting ready for the consummation, for the wedding, and that our purpose here is to behave in such a way that our neighbors are compelled to join us in our preparations, to put on the wedding garments, to keep oil in our lamps as we await the bridegroom. And it's in that space, in that context, that I personally can sense the Lord looking at me and catching my gaze. And it's in that gaze that I can live and thrive. But I need the church to stand with me in that and not be lulled into compromising what we know to be true in order to avoid offense.
Katy's heart has been captivated by the Christian story, by the promise of eternal union with the God who loves her and made her who she is. But I wanted to ask her if she's ever been tempted by a different story about gender, a different story about who she is.
You live in a context where I guess like the kind of cultural narratives about gender and gender dysphoria and the solutions are very much on offer. Has that ever appealed to you? Like that narrative that maybe you are really a man, right?
Yeah.
Or, has that ever drawn you?
Oh my gosh, Abby. So yeah, right. That's another big story. So no, I'm not at all drawn to be a man at this point. Sometime around my mid-20s and early 30s, I started settling into the fact of my own womanhood and started fighting it less. I was certainly influenced by the writings of George MacDonald and C.S. Lewis. MacDonald has pretty much just one idealized woman that appears throughout his books, in his adult fantasy books. And this figure of womanhood that MacDonald presents is as powerful and strong as she is beautiful and compelling, and she is ageless, which he emphasizes again and again. And then Lewis, likewise, has a feminine ideal he presents in much of his fiction, and that actually strikes me as similar to the vision I had as a child of woman as earthy and potent, rich and deep and warm and mysterious and scary in the sense that it feels you don't ever reach the end of her. And MacDonald, bless his heart, with his woman, he started to consider, oh my goodness, this is actually something that I actually don't hate. The fear in looking at this as an adult was less and has been less. And I can look back over the last 10 or 15 years and see how I've gradually eased into my own essence as a woman, or sort of gradually let my weight down into it, so to speak. Now I'm very grateful to be a woman. It's very interesting. It's sort of endlessly interesting. And not only my own womanhood, but I find womanhood in general very interesting. And I actually don't find maleness that interesting. And I really wish that I did, actually. And I don't know if this is going to go on the podcast or not, but it's actually rather boring. And for all those reasons that made me want to be a boy when I was 6 or 7, it seems simple, it's transparent, there's nothing complicated about it. There's not these ups and downs, as many anyway, or it's just really efficient. And even in terms of like the physical infrastructure, the male body is just simpler. It just seems more efficient overall. And now in my early 40s, it just seems boring. I mean, I appreciate that men exist. I'm really glad that they do. I have really great male friends, and I'm very grateful for priests and the male priesthood, and I think that's really important. But I don't actually have an interest in being a man anymore. That's actually completely dissolved.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting features of your story is that it predates the internet. Because what complicates, I think, the narrative of, well, this is just a feature of our culture right now, right? Because there are people like you who experience this spontaneously, it seems like, from a young age, where there isn't like a clear ideology, but it was a part of your experience. It's good for us to know that, right? And to hold complex experiences together and not just have these simplistic narrative.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like now in your kind of church community, like, is this a conversation people can have now and are having, or is there still an absence there?
So in terms of me talking about my experiences with gender dysphoria, my conversations with people in the church are very limited to a small number of close friends at this point and family. On a non-personal level, it does seem like these conversations are opening up. Yes, we need tons of support for marriage. From everything that I've seen and heard, marriage is hard. And there also needs to be an understanding that it's not the end. It's actually not the consummation of all things. And that if people are not in marriage and not actually desirous of being in marriage, that's totally fine. It would be great to have that conversation in the church. And I totally don't want to come across as whiny at all. But I get a little antsy around a sort of an us versus them discussion in church also, where there's the LGBTQ community and then there's the church. And that's absolutely not the case. No, this is us. This is all us. We're all dealing with all of these things. There is no us versus them. I would like to see that discussion or that understanding in church as well.
I feel like in a way that encapsulates a big part of the vision for this project, to actually show, like, look, there are people in the church who are seeking to follow Christ who have these experiences. They're not outside the church. They're here. They're part of us.
People are just dealing with stuff. Everybody, each of us is dealing with stuff all the time. No matter what it looks like on the surface, we're all dealing with it. And so that's just Jesus' command to love each other. We just love and forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive and receive forgiveness. And this is the trick of the church with every kind of brokenness, is to hold up the standard not as a whip or a rod, but hold up the standard of truth as good and wonderful and best. And then, with the other hand, reach out to people where they are. With that said, I mean, in my own local parish, I've received nothing but grace and welcome and warmth whenever I've mentioned anything, so I'm very grateful for that. I mean, just in my own experience, the church has been wonderful, and I've been opening up a little bit more about my own history and experiences. And so far, every time I've dared to do that, I've found warmth and welcome in the church. I have prayer partners that I meet with one-on-one. I've got my spiritual director, and I've got a group of women who comes to my house every other week, and we pray together and stuff. And so those people all know me and where I'm coming from, and pray with me and walk with me, and we look for Jesus together. So, and I think that's what we do really in all corners of brokenness as the church. And I think, okay, I mean, this might be the last thing I say about this. So as Christians in the church, we don't have to be afraid of these issues. We do need to stick with Scripture, that God created them male and female, that we didn't create ourselves, that He actually created us male and female. It's not us who've produced those truths, and it's not up to us to create those truths. Those truths are true. So no matter what we're saying or doing, those truths are always true. But it is up to us to say, this is what we know is true, and let's continue to discover it, and let's continue to see as much as we can of what these icons are pointing to, of maleness and femaleness and gender and marriage. What is this pointing to? Where are we going? And to realize that we're we're not done. This is not it. Our job as the church is not to maintain the status quo, is not to maintain the nuclear family and a democracy in the United States of America. That's not the mission of the church. The mission of the church is to get ready for the wedding and to prepare ourselves. We can look forward with great anticipation to this celebration, to this feast, and get glimpses of it and tell each other about the glimpses that we get, knowing that none of us has anywhere close to the full picture yet.
Stories are sacred things. We need to make room in our hearts and in our parishes for stories that surprise us, that don't fit the mold, stories that show the complexity of human experience and the many ways God is at work in our lives. We need to make room for these stories, but above all, we need to attend to the story, the overarching story of salvation that God is telling through history, through creation, the story of the redemption of the world. Like Katy, we need to keep an eternal horizon, to recognize the story being sung through our very bodies, our maleness and femaleness, a song of union with the God who made us, who loves us, who is calling us to him, a song about love, about a wedding feast that is to come. From the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame, you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This series is written and hosted by me, Abigail Favale. Our producers are Nick and Corinne Starsinik, and our executive producer is Noah Braden. Special thanks to Angela Franks and Katy for being part of today's episode. Thanks for listening.